Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming. So I thought I'd do something a bit different. So brought out a few different build videos, a few different guide videos, stuff on making currency. So I thought I'd bring out more of a playstyle guide. So my first video that I'm bringing out in this kind of series is how to play a healer in Neverwinter. Now this guide is more about how to play a healer rather than particular builds, because I have loads of different builds available throughout, YouTube and various websites. I've also got a paladin and a warlock one on here. Now I'm on the game as we go through this, so apologies if there's pauses and odd noises. There's a few things I want to show you that's a lot easier to show you in game rather than commentating over footage. So I'm just going to firstly try and go to an area that's heavily populated, because there's a few things that I want to run through that massively help when you play a healer. So while we wait for that to load in, I just want to talk generally about your role as a healer in Neverwinter. And it's primarily to keep the tank alive. DPS of course will need heals, but a decent DPS player should be positioning themselves away from the main source of damage. So if, for example, you engage a group of mobs and there's two huge enemies and a few small ones, the DPS should make sure they're not in the red and massive attacks of the big enemies. So if the tank grab aggro, DPS moves around to the side or the back, then it's much easier for the healer A to heal everyone, but also the DPS won't need that much healing. So they stay away from the hard hitting attacks along with you, and you can basically keep the group healed as you go along, but your concentration should be on the tank. So I'm just going to go and show you a few options that are available that help me when I heal, and I think they'll probably help you as well. It's something I never really noticed when it was mod 15 because you didn't really need to heal, but there's a couple of options that massively help. So I've noticed that Yesterhill's on over here, so I'm just going to go and travel over here just so I can find some players, because some of these options I need to see other players to be able to show you how they work. Actually this guy here will do. So as you can see at the moment, when I look at him I can see his health bar. If I go on to options, if you keep scrolling down you'll get to an option that says show player life. If you set this to always, he's ran off, hasn't he? Yeah. But if you set that to always, I've not actually finalised that. Right, let's go actually to this encounter. That's finished. Right, let's just go and find someone. Basically, what that allows you to do is see everyone's health bar without actually targeting them. So you notice when I looked at that player, so all these players, I can't see their health bars unless I look at them. If I go into options and I go down to show player life and I put that always and I put that on, if I now go and chase one of these characters down, you'll see that when I get into a group of players I can always see their health bars. Now it can get annoying because if you're in something like the Yawning Portal or Protector's Enclave, you're going to see everyone's health bar, but you can see there that player, I don't have to look at him to see his health bar, I can always see it. The other thing is to always have your character zoomed right out, because if you're really close you feel the vision's really awful and you can't really see a lot. Whereas if you zoom all the way out, it's actually easy to pan the camera when you're in a boss fight and you can see everybody. The other option that you definitely need to turn off is AoE targeting assist. So when this is on, it basically just targets a random enemy or character with the power that you're looking to use. Now it only matters for ones that you have to aim. It's not going to make a difference for like encounters that target an enemy automatically, but ones like Bastion of Health, for example, you want to be able to aim that manually. You don't want the game to decide who you want to target. So at the moment there's no people around, so it's not doing it, but what will happen if you have AoE targeting on, then it will try and find a person to heal. The annoying thing is it will move you. So if you're, say I want to heal that guy and I hit that, but there's someone behind me, it could spin me around and target that person instead. It's really frustrating and really hard to play a healer with that on. So, as I said, in options, turn off AoE target and assist, and then definitely turn on show player life. It makes a massive difference. As I said, you might want to turn player life off when you go into really populated zones, because it's all you can see. Like, there's a couple of health bars here. If you imagine you're in the Yawning Portal and you've got 30 or 40 health bars, it can get really out of control. So they're two things that can massively help you play a healer easier and keep an eye on what's going on in terms of health bars. Also, when you're in a group, the health bars will be along the side anyway, and that's the way I used to monitor health bars. The problem is it doesn't tell you where that person is. So you could see from your group list that player D needs healing, but then you've then got to find player D on the game. If you haven't got these health bars on, again, you're not going to know directly who they are, and you're not going to know which one needs healing. So having this on helps massively. So as I've said, the fundamentals of healing really is to keep the tank healed. That is your job. Keep the tank alive, obviously heal the DPS, but tank is your primary target. Now, healing in Neverwinter is actually really, really easy in a good, slick group. It's quite a nice chilled out role to play, and it is really, really straightforward, and you've actually got a lot more time than you think to react and heal people. Now, the issue that makes healing more difficult and really frustrating, which unfortunately is abundant in Neverwinter, is DPS running ahead and fighting without the tank or the healer. If you're in a good group and you run ahead and do this isn't a problem because you can probably steamroll the content anyway, and that's fine. But in terms of pug groups, people are still doing this all the time. So what you'll find is they'll run ahead, they'll start fighting, they'll panic because they'll start taking damage, and then they'll run away. But what they've done is they've aggroed all of those mobs. So those mobs are going to continue chasing that DPS player. The tank, who's not there yet, then has to try and gather up all of these mobs. I have to try and find this player and heal them, and it just makes the encounter an absolute mess. If you're a healer, it's the tank and the healer should be leading a group. I know a lot of the times when you move into a group, there's not any communication or anything, but general rule of thumb in an MMO is that tank and healer will dictate the play. Tank most of the time should dictate the play because an encounter is so much easier if the tank engages first, takes aggro, the DPS can then position themselves correctly, and you can burn everything down. Another problem that the DPS running ahead causes is that if they get aggro first, it makes it so much harder for the tank to get that aggro back, which means again, they might get aggro back on some mobs, another DPS might get them back on another mob, and you've just got loads and loads of enemies running around, and it takes longer to kill them, and it's much harder for you to heal everyone, and there's a risk that someone will die. Now, it may sound mean, but if someone constantly runs ahead and dies in a dungeon, I'm not picking them up, I'm not healing them, and if anything, I'm going to jump up and down on their body as they're dying. It sounds harsh, but the only reason people are doing this is because they want to get top on the pain board, which shows how much damage you've done. But it is not that accurate, and also it only really matters at bosses. Who cares how much damage people are doing on mobs? It doesn't matter, they're all easy. Wait for the tank to engage, play properly, get through it quickly if you're in a pug group. If you want to measure the pain board, look at the DPS stats before and after the boss and see how you're getting on. It always feels nice to absolutely rinse everyone else on DPS, but that pain board isn't necessarily telling you that that's the case. Bosses is where skill and DPS matters, and that's where you should be measuring it. So I've gone off piste. I do apologise. It is the one thing, if you decide to play a healer, you're going to come across it a lot and you're kind of going to have to get used to it. Now, the reason I don't necessarily pick people up all the time or waste my healing on them is that in any other MMO, the tank will go first and they will take aggro in difficult content. Issue in Neverwinter is there isn't any difficult content up to mod 16. Lair of the Mad Mage has difficult bosses to an extent, but the mobs are still really, really easy. Like, I've soloed most of the dungeon on characters. It's not difficult to stay alive. But the devs have said the reason they made changes in mod 16 is to make it easier to make newer and tougher content, because that buff meta is now dead. And it's also easier for them to raise caps, balance stats, look at classes. If we look in mod 17, the new trial is an insanely new level of difficulty that we've never seen before in a game. If this difficulty remains, a lot of people with their Leroy Jenkins playstyle are going to be really frustrated, as their mentality won't work. They're not going to be able to charge ahead, then hopefully kill them, if not run away to safety. They're going to run into them and they're going to get rinsed straight away and they're going to die. When I play, I mean, I'm not going to preach to people or anything like that, but when I'm in a group, if I'm on party chat, then, we'll let the tank go first, we'll play properly, because it's a good routine to get into, because you don't know how this game's going to change in the future. So I've kind of gone way off the beaten track there and talked about nothing to do with playing a healer. So if we go back to actually playing a healer, in terms of your stats, your main priority when you're looking at healing is power. Sorry, let me stick my bondings back in first and then we can get an idea. So at the moment, I'm sitting naked with my companion. Now, and you don't have to be stacked. Like, this character's not stacked on power because I've built like a crit build, which you don't need to do. So if we look at me with my companion summoned, I'm only rocking 143k power, and it's easily enough to get through Lair of the Mad Mage. Now, the reason for that is I've concentrated on outgoing healing as well, which unfortunately the majority of your outgoing healings only comes from companions, and some of them, like the Quickling, for example, are ridiculously expensive. The only reason I have this one is because I picked him up in mod 15 knowing that I wanted to play a healer and knowing that these were likely to go up in price. So you want to look for these 5 companions, which is Quickling, Stone of Radiant, the Ion, Polar Bear, Neverember Guard, and then it's not Sellsword, I believe it's Rebel Mercenary. Let's just have a look at it, because they've got the same powers as Sellsword. I don't know why it says Sellsword. So if we go to summon another, what? Okay, I've never seen this before. Okay, there we go. Don't know what I've done there. So let's have a look for him. Yeah, so he's a Rebel Mercenary. So some of these you'll be able to pick up fairly cheap. Some of them you won't. I've got most up to Epic or Legendary, but you don't necessarily need to. Rare is absolutely fine for the content in the game. So if you could even pick up 3 of these companions at Rare, it's an extra 18% outgoing healing. The rest of your healing in terms of outgoing you want to get from Wisdom, and then the rest of it is going to come from your power. So when you're building a healer, you want to go for power and outgoing healing as your priority. Then your other offensive stats such as armor pen, crit, accuracy and combat advantage, because you are still going to need to do some damage. Like, you don't need to heal constantly in dungeons. So there'll be areas where, if we take Lair of the Mad Mage for an example, in the Mimic fight, you're going to be relied on to team up with the tank to kill a Mimic. So you're going to need to be able to do some damage. It's no good just being able to tickle mobs. They're not expecting you to do DPS style damage, but at least be able to do some damage with your character. So as you're building it, obviously DPS look at later, but as you're building a healer, power is what you should be concentrating on. So any gear that boosts your power, take. Any jewelry that boosts it, take it. Any artifacts that come with power, take those. And you want to get it up. Like, as I said, 143 with all my outgoing healing is overkill. I think if you get up to like 130, 140k power and have maybe got 30% outgoing healing, that's easily enough to do all the content if you play properly with your group. And that's kind of all you need to focus on as healer. It's not a difficult role to play. The makeup of the stats is not complicated because we don't need to worry about percentage damage bonuses or positioning ourselves in certain ways or rotations. It's just about keeping the group alive. So if we just talk about my playstyle a little bit, as I say, I do like to DPS as a cleric or any other healer where I can. So I'll make sure my other offensive stats are capped. And I run a Vorpal enchantment to increase my crit severity. Now, this is mainly because I slot a lot of critical chance into my build for the healing. So the Vorpal helps with that, but it also really helps with DPS. And healing in a lot of content isn't needed. Like, you might queue up for an intermediate queue or an advanced queue, and you might get in a dungeon where that you don't take a lot of damage and the team don't take a lot of damage. So then you might want to slot an extra DPS encounter and change your stats up a little bit. But as I say, priority, just concentrate on healing and you won't have any issues. So the last thing to look at in terms of a healer is Divinity. And this is kind of the last thing to go through in terms of playing a healer and how to manage yourself. So Divinity is the bar on the left hand side. When you're out of combat, this will regen on its own. Not at a particularly quick rate, but it does regen on its own. Now the one thing to note is that I'm playing in mod 16 and in mod 17, Cleric and Paladin have both been nerfed. So their powers take more Divinity than before. You should still easily be able to manage it. They're not like doubling them or anything. There are just increases in Divinity costs. Oh, here comes a control wizard to ruin this. So what we'll do, I will tend to play until I get down to about 40% Divinity. So I'll DPS heal, do whatever I'm doing. If I then get down to about 40% divinity, I then need to think, hang on, I need to think about regenning this. And that's when I'll take a step back from the fight and start recharging. If I then get up to, say, above 50%, I'll start again. Now, it all depends on the encounter that you're in. Trobriand in Lair of the Man Mage is a prime example of one where you are going to probably run out of divinity if you don't pay attention and you DPS too much. So for that fight, people are taking damage constantly. So I don't even worry about DPS in that. I just make sure that when I'm not healing, I'm regenerating divinity. Main reason being, again, in that fight, the more DPS you do quickly, the more Scorpions you end up having to fight. But my general rule of thumb for playing the healer is 40% divinity. If I start getting below that, then I need to really think about regenerating some, because I don't want to be left in a position where I haven't got any. So I'm just going to ride my stick pony back to the village. We'll do a quick conclusion and then we'll wrap the video up. So really, in summary, as I said, your job as a healer is primarily to heal the tank. They're the one that's going to take the most damage. They're also the one with the biggest health pool. So you need to prioritize healing and keeping that tank alive. Heal DPS because they should all be within a fair region to do that. Don't worry too much if DPS run off, abandon kind of the MMO play. So I'll just run off, start fighting and die. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to keep them healed. Your job is not to heal through stupidity. Your job is to keep the tank alive so that he can keep aggro and that the DPS can stay safe and do their job. Now, I know there's probably much more to go through, but that in a nutshell is how I play a healer and how I think is the easiest way to play a healer in Neverwinter. So I hope that video helped. Feel free to leave comments, questions, and I'll get back to you. There'll be some more guides to come shortly, but until then, I'll see you in the next video.